It's a very subtle art, I should say, because if it is so obvious, then it would have been very easy and there is no need for this session at all. So it's a very subtle art. There are a lot of engineering candidates that we deal with. There are a lot of other department students with whom we have a research conversation on a day-to-day basis at our university. But then some of them approach it like a technique. Some of them approach it like a scientific, in a very systematic manner. But for me, I think it is more of a subtle art. And why is it very subtle? Because only the reader or the reviewer and the writer of the paper will, only if they are on the same wavelength, or only when the paper is in such a way so that the reviewer gets it, the research paper kind of cracks, right? So we will proceed with this. And are you a research academic? So how many of us are very confident that we are all research academics? I know that there are more than 60 of us here who are participants. I'm also looking at the chat box. So what do you think? Are you really confident that you are a research academic? Just give me a yes or a why. Or do you think you are not very confident about it? If you can just put it in the chat box. I see people constantly raising hands. I'm not sure whether it is just inadvertent or you really have a question. So what do you people think? Okay, yeah. So Patrick says yes, yes, yes. So all of us are very confident that we are all research academics, because earlier there used to be, okay, Siddharth is here. Most of my students are also here. My past students who sat in my research methodology classes. Okay, so this is one thing that always boosts a teacher to see, his or her own teacher, students here. Most of my good friends are also here. Great. Yes, so we are all either on the way, or we know that you can see that there are so many bulbs here on people's head. Some are not glowing, but there is one person on whose head there is a bulb glowing, because suddenly you understand that you're not just an academic, you're also a researcher, right? So that is very important. And most of us, we think that we go to our workplaces to teach and to come back. But then one fine day, suddenly when they're asking either for the convocation report or for the NIRF NAC accreditation, we go through our research publications and then we get into the panic mode, right? That is one reason when you have very less time, you kind of produce very substandard papers, or we succumb to plagiarism or predatory journals, and we get into this kind of a rut. Instead, if we understand that we are not just academics, but we are research academics, we are researcher academics, then I think throughout the year we are very conscious. We just do a tabulation, an academic calendar, and we say that, okay, this first 6 months, I'm going to write a research paper. For this whole year 2022, I'm going to write a research proposal for a grant or something, right? So, and in this first 3 months, I'm going to attend some kind of an online FDP. So there has to be an academic calendar, when we create our to-do lists, we have to be very mindful of this. A lot of us take New Year resolutions saying that I will reduce my Netflix time, I will increase my workout time, I will reduce my sugar intake. So we have so many other commitments to life. But for our professional life, especially because we are all in this academical, environment, it's important that we make these kinds of resolutions also. So in a year, 365 days. So kind of prepare and find out a list of research grants that we can apply for, right? And then for 6 months, okay, these are 2 journals where I want to publish. So these are the 2 preparations that I will have to do. And then once in 3 months, some kind of a 1-week FDP program that we can attend online. And I think thanks to Corona or the pandemic now, all of us have access to these FDP programs or MOOCs or NPTELs, right? We can plan our time and we can also do that. And once in a month, attend a webinar, okay? Some kind of a webinar, or watch recorded webinars. And once in a week, try and read a research article. Read. Okay, so reading a research article, this is like a prescription. I know that I am a doctor of a different sorts, but then I'm giving you a prescription. So once in a week, read at least one research paper. Okay, once in a month, attend an online webinar. Once in 3 months, a proper FDP program or something. And, twice in a year or once in 6 months, try and write a research article. And once in a year, try and submit a research grant. When this becomes a habit, or when this becomes our vision for ourselves, then I think we will be very seriously taken. It does not matter whether you get the grant, but then the entire process of writing, getting peer reviewed, all this will be a great experience by itself. Yes, so we are all research academics. And if you're asking me, so what is a research academic, or who is a research academic? How can I call myself a research academic? In case you have some questions, I have 4 parameters or criteria. So have you published a research paper, which most of us would have done, because all of us have presented a paper, in a conference, we have shared ideas. We don't know whether we are there yet, whether we have arrived, but then we are very confident about doing some small scale research and discussing it in our conference, in our teacher group. And are you a research scholar, or do you guide doctoral scholars? So some of you here must be a research scholar yourself and a teacher, or you must also be guiding some doctoral scholars. So we need that kind of experience, because I strongly believe that we become research supervisors with 0 experience, right? We become I'm a research supervisor, and some of my own students are here. So we become a research supervisor with 0 experience, and we try to replicate the model that our guide was trying to work out with us. Right? And when we do that, we make mistakes, because we are talking about a different generation altogether. My guide belongs to a generation which is different from the way I learn or I teach, and my students are very different. So there will be this constant, trying to understand, or gaps in understanding either the research scholar, and you will also have to acknowledge that being a student, you will have to acknowledge that, because they come from a totally different kind of a background. The culture of research was different. The culture of academics was different. There was no NIRF ranking. There was no predatory journal, right? So very faithfully, we will send the article to a journal which is coming out from a college or a university. When it is published, we would be happy, and that's all. But now we have to put it on Insta, we have to put it on Facebook, we have to share the details with the IQAC. So much pressure is there, right? And if you have received a research grant from any funding body, so these should be like our 4 to-do things for a year, which I strongly believe in. And I think it has also helped me in building a career which is very satisfactory, because I think this is our second lives apart from our families. So the moment we come out of our families, our identities are very different, and we should be very happy with our identity. So just keep these 4 things in mind. So plan for the session today will be, I would talk about understanding the research paper itself. I would talk about the importance of publishing in a journal, understanding the dynamics of a journal, structure of the research paper, and language of the research paper. Right? Because language counts a lot when it comes to writing a research paper. And Q&A, I would also be glad to share some of the experiences that I have seen in this short duration at the Center for Research. First of all, I have a question for you. What is a research paper? Just type a word or a phrase that first comes to your mind. I'm looking at the chat box now. The moment you see research paper or you hear the word research paper, can you just try and type what kind of word comes to your mind? Explore. Okay, so Sudha Achudan says it's all about exploring. Very good. Meena Kumari says academic writing. Okay. Probing, perspective, new knowledge, communication, analysis. Yes. Okay. Vivek says a miniature thesis. Vivek, I'm glad that you're finally able to attend one of my lectures. Akshita says it has to be original. Yes. Ramya says it has to be systematic. Okay. Expressing knowledge. Yes. Sai. So some of us are very good in expressing emotions. Some of us are very good in, doing several things, but expressing knowledge is very difficult. Okay, Naveen says it is research, excellent, profound, a new approach, a quest for something new and innovative, finding something which is not explored before. Yes, great. So these are some of the ideas that we have about research itself, right? So when we talk about a research paper, we are looking for certain new ideas. We are looking for certain, contexts that are new. So sometimes when my scholars say, but then ma'am, there is no literature available on this topic, right? They are very upset that I suggested a topic on which there is no literature. Then I tell them, don't you think that is one reason why you should be exploring this topic? Right? And then sometimes they also come up with so many papers are available already and there is so much work that has been already done. In that case, I say, so this is a great chance to show that you are a researcher with a great perspective. Okay, and interpretation, wonderful, Rizwana, Fatima, because interpretation I see is lacking in most of the literature papers that we write. Okay, there is no interpretation. Sometimes I see paragraphs that are just, a kind of a glue of quotations, and the glue is missing. The glue is interpretation, because as a literary scholar, as a scholar of literature, you are expected to have that kind of thinking where you are interpreting not just what the author is saying, but also what the critique is saying, right? So it is not like Anita Desai writes this novel and then she talks about this, not just stopping with that, or somebody else, right, Mr. X analyzed Anita Desai's novel and he said this, not stopping with that. Okay, so I always used to tell my students to imagine that the literature review or the kind of analysis you do, whether it's an ELT paper or a literature paper, it is more like a burger, like a sandwich. So imagine that the patty in the middle, okay, if that is going to be your quotation or some kind of reference that you're using, it needs to go with the introduction of it, the justification of using that quotation, why is it relevant to your research, and then the base, which is your interpretation of the quotation itself. So sometimes when I see that lot of quotations are there in bracket references and that is one paragraph, then I tell them, where is your interpretation in this? Where is your voice in this? Right? Yeah, it's a formal document stating some new knowledge. Very good. So new knowledge, new synthesis and all this. Great, you're a great audience. So for me, research is more like the physical process. There is a lot of physical process. I have to key the word. I have to go and prepare a questionnaire. I have to read the books, borrow the books, make notes, right? I have to make notes. I have to take down the words. Okay, because when I'm thinking about writing a title for my research paper, it is not like I just think and the title comes. I have to think about, I have to cull out so many words from other ideas. Then I have to see how does it work together? How does it look together? So there is the physical process. We write so much. And then there is also the mental process of deriving the answer to your question from the information that you gather. Okay, so if you look at research writing itself, the process of sharing the research to your research question along with evidence. Now, this is very important. So some of us have the habit of making these sweeping generalizations saying, I'm going to talk about Indian women in this paper. And then I'm like, okay, so Indian women is itself a huge category. Which category of Indian women are you going to talk about? Is it chronologically given? Is it geographically? Or is it socially or culturally? Economically? There are so many differences, right? So we will have to do that kind of reasoning and explanation. That is very important. So this is research and research writing. Now, can you tell me what words collocate with research? So we know that collocations are word pairs. So imagine the first word in the pair is research. Can you tell me what other words can collocate with research? Like we said research paper, so you can't type paper. Research question and okay, Sai Hemant says question and answer. Can you give me one word that collocates with research? Which word collocates? Research findings, okay? So So Aruna says research findings. Findings is one word that collocates. Great. So these are all certain things to rake our brains and find out, what are our basic assumptions about research itself. Ashwini says article, research article, very good. Meena says research critical thinking, we usually don't say, okay. Research systematic. I'm asking about a collocation, like research paper, research article. A research article and research paper are nearly the same. Research analysis, okay. Research framework, great. Without a framework, your research will just fall apart. So research framework is very important, great. The process, proposal, excellent, Tulasi. So Rohit says the research process that we all have to be aware of. Just let the answers keep coming. So first of all, if you see, the collocations will be like, we think about the research scholar, then we talk about research projects. And the most important collocation is research funding, because funding is important, whether it is your NIRF ranking or your institutional reputation or individual reputation. Research thesis, right? Research thesis. And then research findings. Now, research methodology, that is extremely important. Vivek mentioned framework. So methodology is important, understanding how I am going to do the research. So all of us, the moment you go and meet a guide for the first time, they are going to ask you all these what, how, where, which, why questions, all the WH questions. So methodology is a very important question, and some of us get this very late in our research process. Aptitude and research award, right? So aptitude again is a very subtle skill, I would say. Some of them have it very naturally. Like, in school when they ask us to run, some of our friends will run excellently well, while we would be not able to do it, and we would just look at them and say, oh my God, I didn't know that you could run. Because there's a natural aptitude in them. And when we don't have that aptitude, we have to try really hard, right? Now imagine that one of you who is not an athlete, one of us who is not used to rigorous practice or, even at the zonal or state level, asking us to run, it would be completely nonsense. And if there is a compulsion, we know the amount of hard work we have to do, right? Whether you're waking up at 4 in the morning or eating only that protein kind of a food. So it's rigorous practice. And even if you miss it one day, your aptitude levels are going to come down. Same with research also. You think that before the submission of the progress report or before the submission of some kind of a review, if I sit and work, that is enough, because this is not my MA or MPhil, where I have to attend classes. There is nobody to keep a check on me, right? So the guide cannot constantly keep telling you, you have to do your work, you have to draw your timetable, you have to do this now. It is understood that you are a person with aptitude towards research, and then we get selected. Most of your friends would be still searching for a guide because the guide hasn't identified that this person has a research aptitude. Okay, and then research award. So the word that all of you want to hear when it comes to your convocation or award. So first things first, when you are preparing your article for a specific journal, see, this is one thing I keep telling everyone. Read at least 10 articles from the same journal. You need to understand what that journal stands for. Okay. So say, for example, I'm planning to publish a paper, whether it is on feminism, whether it is on eco-critical studies or on ELT, and I identify a particular journal I want to publish in this journal. So imagine I want to publish in ELT journal or the TESOL Quarterly, which are the top-notch journals in my area. So I have this promise that I have made to myself. I will read at least one article every day, right? I told you read one article every week. Read at least 10 articles from the same journal. If you want to publish in a particular journal, see the kind of articles that get selected. These are the subtleties that I'm talking about. So some people will have no clue about any journal. Their friend would recommend the journal saying that there is a very less acceptance time. Okay, We don't have the patience to send articles to journals and wait for 6 months together. We don't understand that in that 6 months, we should be writing a different article, but we just want that article to get published. So it's a continuous kind of process. Now, say, for example, you have seen badminton players, somebody like, PV Sindhu or all these people. It is not like they prepare only for the Olympic. Olympic can be the greatest medal of their lifetime, but they don't wait for 4 years. In between, whatever comes, right? They keep preparing, they keep getting their titles, they keep winning the titles. So that kind of constant preparation. Not saying that, okay, I have sent it to this journal, so now I can just rest myself. I need to keep preparing so that I have something constantly brewing. For the past 2 years, this is very important, because maybe in the 2 years, the editorial board changed. Maybe in the 2 years, the article decided to look at a different idea. Maybe in 2 years, that journal merged with a different journal and their focus is different. So if you have some article, some journal in mind, you better read 10 articles from the same journal. Understand the type of journal. So all of us have these doubts. Should I pay and publish, or is paying for publication a bad thing? It depends on the kind of journal you want to publish. Open access journals, right, which let you read all their articles. If you log into that Web of Science, or if you log into Gestor, which are available in most of the institutions, libraries, they subscribe and keep this, whether it is the public libraries or the British Council, the Anna Centenary Library, the biggest library in Asia. So you know that all these things, I think that's the second greatest library in Asia. So you know that you have to understand if those articles you are able to access without paying something, then it's an open access journal, which means that they will charge the author. So paying to publish, I don't think it's a totally a bad thing, because some journals will have to collect fee from the author. And then subscription-based journal. And some of you, if you open a Taylor and Francis or a Wiley online and you want to read an article, it will say, purchase this article for $40 or for 20 euros or for 10 euros, $10, right? So those journals will not charge from you. They will charge from the reader. So it's a completely different ball game that we have to understand, and don't feel that, oh, that journal is asking money from me, so it's a predatory journal. Okay, it's a cloned journal. So these are all certain words that I don't think our previous generation used at all. They wouldn't have used words like cloned journal or predatory journal, just like we are using quarantine and isolation period for the first time in our lives. So these are some things that I want you to keep in your mind. And when you are choosing a journal, right, I would say that before you start writing a paper, first you identify the right journal that will be helpful for your career. And how do you do this? How did I do that? I'll tell you, I used to read one particular article, which I think, is in my area of interest. Then I would look at the profiles of people in universities who have written those articles. Now, say if I'm reading a 2021 article published in a journal, then definitely those people must be having some institutional affiliation. So I go and I look at their profiles. I see what kind of journals they publish in. So a good start would be to look at university professors in India, whether it is Jamia Millia or whether it is, JNU, the Jadavpur University or Allahabad, some Central University of Kerala, University of Madras. Okay, you can look at all these professors, BITS Pilani, IITs. You can just look at the profiles of these people. And these days, if you see, they all have an IRINS ID, right? So the Indian Research Initiative is there now, where they all log in and they give their information about publication and all those things. So they update it. That is a must for their NIRF. So you can try and see where they are publishing. And then after a particular amount of time, you can move to international professors. You can move and you can see where they are publishing. So this kind of reduces your job because you're standing on the shoulders of the giants, right? So looking at the scope of the journal would have clearly said, we do not receive unsolicited articles. We receive articles only related to this topic. The moment we see unsolicited, we should understand that they are not interested in any article that we write, but they are more interested in the areas in which they are focusing on. And one more thing is, another thing that you can do is look at CFP. CFP is call for papers, not just in journals, but also in book chapters. So there are a lot of book chapters, call for papers that come from Indian universities or elsewhere. So they will have a particular editor, and they will also have a publisher, Springer or Palgraves, Pearson, right? So edited books you would have seen a lot. So you can read those edited books, and you can also work on a book chapter. So it is not like you write only a journal article. You can also write a book chapter and you can publish, because book chapter also has equal validity when it comes to your career. Okay. Accepted type of articles, you need to understand what is this journal all about. You need to do some kind of an investigation like a detective, like Sherlock Holmes. Then readership. Mostly all journals, if you open, they will have a proper website where on the top they would write several things: scope, manuscript guidelines, submission fee, impact factor, indexing, archives, contact us, okay, editorial board. So you open a journal and you read all these. You just don't blindly look at the Gmail ID or some kind of an email ID which they have given and you send them a paper. No, you look at the indexing. I will come to that in a bit. You will look at the archives. Go to the archives and see whether they have been consistent in their publication. Now imagine I give my resume to a company and I tell them that I'm interested in working with their company. They would identify even if I have 1 or 2 year gap in my work experience, right? These gaps. And they would tell me, can you explain? So we will have to find out. Now, say for example, I was on maternity leave or I was on a sabbatical or I just felt like taking a break. Like that. Similarly, when you look at a journal, see whether they have a consistent arc. Okay, consistent arc of publication, and whether they have been publishing the same kind of work. Otherwise, you will fall a victim to the wrong kind of journal. Current relevance. How relevant is this journal today? Because whether it is Scopus or whether it is Web of Science or UGC Care List for that matter, journals come and journals go. Just like men may come and men may go. Because when the indexing or the impact factor falls low, that journal is pushed out, right? And then there is all this UGC cloned journals where they see the website, they see the name of the journal. There is a Russian journal where, there is only one alphabet that is changing. And none of us know Russian, right? There are so many alphabets in one word which we don't even pronounce. So the moment we start typing the journal's name in Google, Google gives us a lot of suggestions, right? And this journal has the capacity to tweak itself, the fake journal, and make it appear in the first 2 or 3 search lists. And we click on that. And then we go and we submit our manuscript there. But when we send it to the ISSN number, maybe it will be a little different. But then you will see, no, this is the same journal that I saw in the UGC Care List. So in the journal, the last alphabet maybe would have changed. We will be blind and we will go and publish there. Then they will give us a nice looking certificate also. But then there will be a problem later. So impact factor. Some journals do not have impact factors. Journals published by universities sometimes do not have impact factor because they are published for a particular group of audience. Okay, so you will have to see if the journal is indexed, and do not simply go by the mails that come to you. As an academic, I think because our emails are so available in the websites and other places, whether it is our LinkedIn or IRINs or our profiles in the university websites. So we become an easy victim for all these predatory journals. In a day, I get at least 10 emails telling me that my manuscript is already accepted. Then I keep wondering, which journal is this? I don't remember sending a manuscript to this journal. So these journals, you know, the power of big data today, right? As researchers, we also have to be having a little bit sense of data. So they look at your profile and they tell you, you have already published in this journal, this particular paper. Okay, so do you want to rework on this paper and publish in this journal? So I do not trust journals which contact me. I do not believe in, you know, that publication is a very easy thing. I'm very satisfied when I write the proposal, when it gets reviewed, when they say you have to work with this. I would like to say one of my experiences when I was working on an article to be published with the British Council. I was working with Professor Brian Tomlinson. So he's an expert in materials development. You wouldn't believe the amount of you know, back and forth mails we had. So he being an expert, I love the way in which I worked. But these days, you know, whether it is our own students or others, when we give them some feedback and when we tell them redo this and come, they feel very bad, right? They do not want criticism. They find that sometimes the journal would accept, but the guide doesn't seem to like it. So when we work with different experts, we learn a lot of experiences. So recently, another good experience I had was one with Professor Richard Smith from Warwick University, UK. So because the kind of academic culture there is very different. They look into everything, sentence type, everything, right? So when we get these kind of opportunities, we must just jump into it and use it completely. We should, you know, somebody just used the word leverage their experiences. We should leverage their experiences so that we can transfer it into our country and our context. Great. The next is the review time, which I told you already. Like say, for example, in case you understand that they have a very, all of us are in a hurry, right? Who has the time? I need my acceptance time. I need a yes or a no within a week's period, so that I can send the journal to, I can send the paper to some other journal. But review time, good journals take a very long review time. So I am part of the editorial board of Scopus Index journal. And in fact, I have sent my own paper to that journal. I know that the review time is very different because I know what we do. I know what editors do. You know, because we have very busy academic schedules. So reviewing a paper which is sitting in our inbox will be the least priority for us, unless they send us a couple of reminder mails. Okay. Though we agree to do all this when we get selected as an editor. And then the author guidelines. I think it is absolutely important to read author guidelines. And I find that most of the Indian researchers, including myself, we give least importance to author guidelines. Whether it is the font, whether it is the structure of the article, we are happy that we finished the article which we started writing. And we are not bothered about the author guidelines at all. Now I'm coming to another important part, which is searching for journal papers itself. So all of us know that, like I told you, to write a journal paper, you have to read a lot of journal papers. Google Scholar is a ready-to-go place for us, right? So in case we don't want random websites. So some students, if you see, they will be quoting random websites in their references. But then that is not actually accepted, because a website can be there today and it won't be there tomorrow. You cannot use a website as a reference unless it is like, a website that is of very good standard. Whether it is now, say, for example, you want to talk about the current educational scenario because of pandemic, then you go to UNESCO. Because UNESCO or UNICEF, they have been constantly updating their data on how many students have missed their classes, how many hours of learning has been lost, which countries schools are now open, which country is in complete lockdown. So this kind of data is available from WHO or UNESCO or UNICEF, right? So whether it is ICT tools, they give you why ICT is important. Then random blogs. And one more thing is, I would like to go to the previous slide, because when it comes to author guidelines, many journals today, very good journals, they tell you that you have to use at least a couple of references from their own journals from the archives, right? So say, for example, I'm writing to Asian EFL journal, okay, or TESOL journal. It has in very fine print saying that your references should include 2 articles published in our journal. Okay, so this is to increase their citation index, which will in turn increase their impact factor, which will in turn increase their chances of staying in the Scopus list or in the Web of Science list. Most of us don't read that, and we just go ahead and send our paper. So we have to read that also. If they say that you have to give reference from our own articles, refer to some of the articles, definitely there will be, some kind of an introductory sentence or something, and we can use it in our paper. So we have to read. We have to read the articles from that particular journals. That's exactly what I'm trying to tell you. So Web of Science, if you see, when we talk about Web of Science, checking whether the journal is authentic in a given particular standard, like you know that Web of Science, you can actually go and check, and it is not like you have to pay something to log in. See, it says create free account. You can just, when you click on that create free account, this is just a screenshot. When you just click on that create free account, it will tell you, should I use your Google ID, just like any other website. If you say yes, use my Google Gmail Google account, and then it will just go inside. Okay, so this is your Web of Science for you. Gestor is a very standard journal, storage, the database that we use. It's a very good kind of, because it has been there for a very long time, and I have been using Gestor since my own PhD before 10-15 years. So that's a very reliable thing. And Springer also. So go to these databases, look at the journals that they have, pick a journal that suits you, then go ahead and publish. Okay. Now say, for example, okay, this is the UGC Care List's original website. Now there are 1 million lists that are being shared on WhatsApp groups, right? Even in our own university WhatsApp groups, we keep getting a lot of lists saying updated UGC Care List for English literature, updated UGC Care for arts and humanities, for social sciences, for multidisciplinary. But then this particular website, if you see, now this is from the Savitribai Phule University, Pune, where they have given this list. Even if you go to the UGC main website list, they will take you to this website and they show you the list. So you can see how it is updated. So you can see the center of the website is alert, list of cloned journals, group 1 and group 2. If you do a bit of exploration, in order to be a good researcher and in order to publish a research paper, I think you have to be a good researcher and look into this also. So you can see academic integrity and research quality. All these things are given also in the UGC's guidelines. Okay, so you will have to take care of that also. See, they have given so many disclaimers here. The UGC Care List has only 2 groups instead of the 4 groups. But some people will be looking into those things. It is not hierarchic. Okay, so it doesn't matter if your journal is the top 10 or top 20, because it is very different. Okay, and then you can just go to this particular website and refer if you want to publish in a multidisciplinary journal, and then you can see how this works for you. This is another internationally accepted way of checking the authenticity of the journals, Kaimago journal and country rank. So even if it is a Web of Science journal or a UGC journal, it will fall under 4 quartiles: Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. Okay, so if it is in quartile 1, if it is a Q1 ranked journal, it's a great journal. Now that's what they say, and we never know where these ratings are coming from, but I will show you the criteria that they use also. Then Q2, okay, you can publish in a Q2 journal, it's not a problem. Q3 and Q4, maybe as a researcher, if you are desperate to publish, if it is in your list, I would recommend that you go and publish. Or in our early careers, most of us are like, okay, let me at least get a list of publication. So at those times, you can go and publish. But otherwise, if you are an established academic, if you are an assistant professor, when most of you introduced, I saw that you are all assistant professors in colleges. I wouldn't recommend that you go to a Q3 or a Q4 journal, but then you should be able to publish in a Q1 journal. Now, SkyMago journal and Country Rank, it gives you the list where you can check for the Scopus list. Okay, so this is the website which you should go to, because I'm showing you the screenshots of these websites because there are a million easily curated websites which are fake, which you can land into very easily when you click on a mail which has come into your inbox. Okay, so that is something I wanted to tell you. Now, I just told you what will be the criteria. Now, example, some databases like Scopus is a database, Web of Science is a database where there are a lot of curated journals, but suddenly that journal disappears from Scopus. Suddenly that journal is sent out of WOS. They have some norms, originality and concept of the article, the data, because all journals are started with a great, vision in order to kind of promote and encourage that area of research. Like maybe one person was very instrumental in starting that journal and they want to keep that standard. Now, if you look at science journals like Nature, okay, so you will have to think about that. Data collection practices, ethical data collection practices. You have to be very careful when you're dealing with primary group of children. Figures and their relevance to the articles, references, structured writing where grammar is not the only criteria. Some of us think that we can install Grammarly in our laptop or computer, and whenever we make a mistake, Grammarly is going to point out. So if there are no green lines or red lines or blue lines, my article is clean. Structured writing is different from, grammar. It's different from making grammatical mistakes. When you ask someone to read your article, the amount of ease with which they read the article, also understanding the concept, is very important. There has to be a flow, there has to be a structure. Okay, and also nowadays it's a very, it's a fashion. The journals also tell you that our acceptance ratio is only 32%. It is only 18%. We reject a lot of articles. Okay, so are these the kind of criteria that we have? Then citations of the articles that appear at their outlet. So more citation. Are people citing this article over and over again? So I told you a simple technique which many journal uses. They ask you to quote from their own journal. And if people don't do that, their article may not get selected. Now, unfortunately, if you see, because, I also now look into these things apart from my teaching, all these norms have brought to the rise of exploitative journals, okay, that are the academic charlatans, also known as the predatory journals. There is a separate list called the Bales list. I'm not showing you that list today. You can try and explore it. So in the Bales list, there are a lot of predatory journals. So in case you are going to publish in a journal, just check in the Bales list. So I want you to be very cautious when you are publishing in a journal. Look at the editorial board. A good journal will have a very big editorial board. Okay? A very vast editorial board with a good mix of nationalities and genders. Okay, so like I told you that I'm part of an editorial board of a journal. If you see, we are a very mixed group of all countries. From every continent, there are at least 2 or 3 of us. And men and women together. Okay. Affiliations of the editorial board. Sometimes I will go and check the affiliation, that person on the editorial board, and see their publications. How much have they published? Okay, so H index is different. If you simply say their H index, you better go and look at their publication. Ask yourself these questions. Have they published at reputed journals or outlets in recent years? Is their affiliation a reputed institution? So you know the QS rankings, right? You know the QS rankings. So for universities and colleges, are they from good QS ranked universities? Then publishing policies. So some websites of the journals, if you see, there will be no information at all. The contact ID would be simply a Gmail ID. Which kind of a reputed journal will have simply a Gmail ID? Okay. So we will have to see how many articles do they intend to publish each year. It has to be consistent. If you look at some journals that are called fake journals or predatory journals, in one issue they will have 112 or 150 articles. Okay. Next issue they will have nothing. No planned journal will do this. In case they have too many articles this time, they will plan and they will say, no, we will have it later. Similarly, if they have special issues, they will make the call for papers in much advance time. Okay, so do they have charters or bylaws or constitutions? So bylaws is all these legal, copyright, all these things. So mostly all ECS, okay, the Emerging Citation Index, all these journals, they have a very structured bylaws. Mostly a university-supported Scopus Index journal is safe. If you go to NIT Trichy's website, they have the list of Q1 journals. I refer to that list very often because they give you for arts and science, they give you for arts and humanities, they give you for language and literature. So you can actually check, okay, and you can go and pick. And it's a very latest updated one. They give you the dates also. So I go to a particular institution and I take their, I go and check in that particular journal. University-run journals, they have stricter norms and organizational structure. Azim Premji University, it has a very good journal. Okay, you can just go and check on their website, language and language teaching, language and literature. They have one more, but it is not indexed in Scopus. It is not indexed in anything. But I love publishing in that journal because it helps you connect to a particular group of audience. Now, Scopus source is one of the best places to search. When in doubt, you can always email them. They also reply to your emails. So just check about the status in their database. Okay, now moving on to researcher development framework. This is something that I want to tell you because as researchers, we also discussed about frameworks. Okay, I'm not sure if this is very clear, but you can always Google this picture and find out. So this is the researcher development framework pie, which I call. So it looks like a pizza and there are so many parts of it. There are 4 domains, domain A, B, C, and D. So domain A talks about knowledge and intellectual abilities, the techniques to do research. Do I have that? So this is like a self-reflective chart. Okay, you should have a picture of this in your cabin or in your desk so that you can look at it. How strong am I in my domain A? Do I have the good knowledge base? Of course, we have done our BAs, MAs, MPhils. So our knowledge base should be really good. We read regularly. What about my cognitive abilities? Am I able to structure my writing? Am I able to read different articles on the same and get it done? What about my creativity? Okay, how can I actually add more points to this knowledge area? So this is basic. If you do not have this, you cannot progress as a researcher. Domain B is your personal effectiveness. What is the biggest excuse people give when you ask them why are you not writing research papers? Because they do not know self-management. Professional and career development, they are not too keen about it. It's okay, I've got a job, I'm very happy, so I'll just do whatever I want. Professional and career development is important because your development is your institution's development. And institutions development is the nation's development. Okay, so self-management and your personal qualities. Are you ready to do that kind of reading? Are you ready to sacrifice watching a movie and reading some research articles? So it is your personal quality. That is called personal effectiveness, the personal qualities and approach to be an effective researcher. Look at domain C, research governance and organizations. Like what I told you now, the knowledge of the standards. Is this in Web of Science? Is this in Scopus? Is this in this particular standard? Q1 journal, Q2 journal, requirements and professionalism to do research. If you do not have domain C at all, and if you have a lot of domain A, I don't think you will be able to publish. And look at domain D. So when it comes to domain C, we have things like professional conduct, research management, finance, funding, and resources. So I always tell people that if you finish a project, you quickly write a research paper. We recently started this podcast, okay? Anna University, all our teachers, we started together a podcast. This is a podcast for the English teachers. So what we do is sometimes is when we conduct discussions, when we collect materials for this podcast, it is good research. So we plan and we convert this into research papers, okay? So do you have that kind of funding and resources? Okay, of course, podcast costs you zero, but then when people listen to it and when we know that when we are using it as a very good resource collection method, then it becomes very effective. And look at domain D. So I think about domain D a lot because I think about engagement, I think about influence, and I think about impact. The knowledge and skills to work with others and ensure the wider impact of research. When you are on the editorial board, you are in a very critical position. How do you engage with the writers? What do you tell them so that they understand what corrections they are expecting from your review? And how are you influencing others? Are you having a positive influence, whether it is your own research scholars or your students or your colleagues themselves? And the kind of impact you're creating within your department, within your college. So do you have that knowledge and skill to work with others? Because these days, if you see collaborative papers, one person is sitting in China, one person in India, one person in Singapore, collaborative papers are easily accepted. Okay, so engagement and impact. Do you constantly say yes to certain engagements? Like, do you go and present in a conference? Do you spend that little registration fee to attend a workshop? Do you go and meet people so that you can get into contact with them very easily, right? Now, say for example, I tell my scholars very regularly that read research articles that are coming from recent issues, contact those people, see if they can help you in your research. You simply cannot write to a professor sitting in England or Canada and say, oh, I want your help in my article, in my research. You just begin by saying, I recently read your article published in this journal and it kind of, it engaged with my domain knowledge a lot and it has created an impact on the way I think about my research area. So thank you for this. And this is my research area where I look at this in the Indian context. Then the person will reply you, right? So that is called communication and dissemination. Do you have a good website for yourself? Do you update your profiles? Okay. And then working with others. How do you actually work with others? So you know that at Anna University, it is a technical university. So people who are from mechanical engineering and civil engineering, these are the core subjects which university specializes in. Funds come into these departments. Okay, but to work with these people is a different ballgame. To have that kind of engagement, to see that you can provide valuable inputs, what you bring to the table kind of makes sense to everyone there. How do you work with others? So that is called influence and impact, right? So if you are a good researcher, you will have to look at domain A, B, C, and D, and this is readily available in the internet. If you can just enter researcher development framework, And I'm not going to ask you which do you think is the strongest area that you are in or the weakest area. Tonight, just take a moment, take a printout or take a screenshot and keep thinking, which is my area that I'm really strong in? Am I really strong in my knowledge base because that's the basic? How good is my creativity? Okay. Should I work on my self-management? Should I work on finance or funding and resources? Or should I work on my skills of working with others? Okay, so how accessible are you? How open are you in giving your comments? Are you very critical? So all these things are extremely important. Okay, so this was one activity that I want you to do. Identify one strength and one weakness of yours from the researcher development framework. You can try and do it at a point when you are free. I'm not doing it now because I know that I have only 30 more minutes. Great. So now, so this is the publishing cycle. Okay. If you look at academic publishing, this peer review process is very important. Peer review process, as in I'm an assistant professor, you are an assistant professor, you give me your paper, I read and I kind of review it. Then you have the editing and preparing. Then you have the production. Then they have to publish and promulgate. Then more promotion. Okay, manage submission. This is the basic. This is basically the journal's job. This is what the journal does, and it takes a lot of time. Okay, so we need to keep in mind this. Now, if you look at the peer review process itself, I hope you are familiar with this movie. I watched it sometime last week. Okay, one of my Netflixing days. Don't Look Up. So, of course, you can see that this is taking place in the Oval Room, in the the presidential palace, White House. So you can see Meryl Streep posing as the U.S. president in this movie. If you see, you can see Leonardo DiCaprio sitting here, and with him is Jennifer Lawrence. So he is a PhD guide, and she is the PhD scholar. Okay. Now when she's doing her PhD research, she finds that there's a comet that a shooting star, a comet that is too huge, diameter of 9 to 10 kilometers, that is coming to hit the planet, and they have to do something about it. So they access the US President's office, and they say that this is really important that we look into it. And the question that everyone is asking is, so you can see the experts from NASA, you can see the experts from others who are all sitting there. So they are asking, is this data peer reviewed? Okay, so peer review is a very important process, whether it is ELT research or literary research or scientific research, or whether it's like astronomical levels of research, like what happens in this movie. Those bits are really interesting, where as a PhD scholar, she's trying to tell him things and he's trying to convey it to others, but then the president, their roles are very different. They cannot create panic in people. So it's an interesting movie, and I particularly enjoyed the bits of conversation that was happening between the scholar and the guide. So the peer review process, if you see, it started much earlier. In 1665, okay, it was called Philosophical Transactions by the Royal Society of London, and it is believed that reviewers are the backbone of the editorial process because they examine and they comment on the manuscripts. So peer reviewing is very important. That is why if you look at many universities, they would have given publish in a peer-reviewed journal. Okay, so look at this. This is about how people kind of write. Now this is Newton's words, like when he says that there are so many particles around me that are very complex, how it all began, and he's talking about God. But then there is a recent rewriting of this, okay, where it is reported in a very complex manner, in a very modernized version. I hope that most of you would have read jokes or memes about Shashi Tharoor complicating very simple words. So this is just a sample where I'm trying to say that when Newton wrote, we know that Newton is a great scientist, a great researcher, but he wrote like that. We cannot write like this. Okay, I'm moving on to the next section where I'm talking about the structure of the research article. Now, this is the overall structure. Okay, definitely a title is a must. Authors and affiliations. Your abstract is a must. Keywords, definitely. Then comes your introduction. Now, when it comes to these materials and methods, your results, your discussion and conclusion, these will differ based on the methodology that you have adopted, whether it is a quantitative paper or a qualitative paper. A same research question can be done in both quantitative and qualitative ways. Now, say for example, I'm interested in knowing the eating habits of adolescents, right? So what I can do is, I can try and bring a bunch of adolescents and I can make a focus group discussion. Now that will be a very qualitative research, or conduct a semi-structured interview. Or I can prepare a questionnaire and I can do it quantitatively. And I can use a Likert scale, I can use rating, I can collect a lot of data. But then triangulating or corroboration, that is a big word in research. If you are using this mixed methodology where you are cross-checking, where you are verifying that the results of your quantitative analysis which show that, say for example, pizza is their most favorite food, or they love aerated drinks. If the focus group discussion students say that, no, we love idli sambar more than pizza, then the online survey that you have done is of no validity at all. You do not have to throw the baby with the bathwater, with the bathwater. You have to see why there is a contrast in your results and explore more on that. You need not say, oh, these students say this and those students have said this. So the way you are looking at the sample, is it a purposive sampling? Is it a convenient sampling? Is it a snowball sampling? Right? So your research methodology needs to be very, very strong in case you are going to try and do some kind of a research. And then your material, and in case you're doing a literary research. So for literary research, you know that you would have already identified certain theoretical frameworks. And when you work with certain theoretical frameworks, you know very well that you are trying to fit the texts or the content into those theoretical frameworks and prove that this particular text talks about trauma in this way. This particular text has a lot of ecological concerns. This particular text talks about learning methods. Okay, so when you talk about these things, again, this basic structure should be in your mind. What is the material? I'm using fiction. I'm using poetry. What is the method? Close reading, content analysis, discourse analysis. I should be able to tell you, right? And what are the results? So what have I found out? So I found out that teenagers do a lot of stress eating. These words were not used by the teenagers themselves. They were not used by the adolescents themselves. Now, why do teenagers watch a lot of OTT? Why are they stuck to binge watching? And we will think that they are using it as an escape from reality. But if you sit and talk with them, you will find out a whole lot of different ideas. Okay, this is one kind of research that I'm currently doing for a book chapter. So when I spoke with them, they seem to be of a totally different generation. Of course, I belong to a different generation. I should be ready as a researcher to portray in a very authentic manner what they have told instead of thrusting or imposing my perspectives. Okay, so that is called results. So when I tell you they do a lot of stress eating, they might not know that they are doing stress eating, but they might tell you, I feel like eating an ice cream as soon as I finish my exam. That is what they would say. But you need to interpret it as, so they eat ice creams as a kind of a stress reliever or a stress buster. Okay, so this kind of interpretation you should be able to. And then the discussion and conclusion. Of course, acknowledgement is very important. I will tell you why acknowledgement is very important, because in case you are receiving a grant or a funding from a particular agency, from a university or something. You might be receiving a fellowship from a university for your PhD research. Unless you mention this, the university cannot take credit for it in the NIRF ranking. And the NAC accreditation will be also impacted because of this. So acknowledgement is very important. And then your references, like I told you, referencing in the particular way, whether it is the APA or MLA or the in-house style, journal style, all these things are important. So logical manuscript structure, your readers have 4 key questions. Keep the reader in mind while you're writing. Okay. So introduction, why did you do the study? That is the question the reader will be interested in. Okay. And then what did you actually do to find the answer for the why question? What were the results? So what did you find? And how does the study advance this field? So what is the discussion on this? So the readers have only these 4 questions. And as a researcher, after writing your research paper, if you can ask someone to answer these 4 questions, if you can see that they are able to answer these 4 questions after you have written the paper, it is a success. Then it shows that your paper has a logical manuscript structure. So there is this pyramid structure, there is this hourglass structure, there are different approaches to research methodology. So you introduce the topic, talk about the international and the local relevance. Then you talk about a broad and a specialized context of audience. Okay, so you can say that this article will have implications for teachers who are teaching online during the pandemic, especially in countries like India with low resources. Okay, what is known about the topic? Up-to-date studies. This is something that I keep telling my scholars also. Do not bring in literature review or in introduction or in your background of the studies that are outdated. Articles about online learning and teaching were written before the pandemic also. But you cannot use them when you are using them as references for pandemic teaching or learning. Or you should create a separate context, and under that subheading, you should talk about it. Okay, so when I receive these kind of articles, I say, okay, this is for online learning in a blended method, in a hybrid context when all is well. Pandemic teaching and learning is not the same kind of an online learning, right? So we will have to keep this in mind. What is not known? Now, this is very important. This is what the examiner or the reviewer is looking for. The reviewer wants to know, okay, all this is fine, but what is your story? What is your contribution to this field? So this is how the introduction actually happens. When it comes to methods, what are you doing? You are looking at researchers in your field, okay, who have already reproduced your kind of research in a different way. You look at peer reviewers, you evaluate your study design, you go and check with another professor or you check with another friend and say, see, you wrote the paper, right? I just read it. I'm planning to do this kind of a study design. Do you think it would work? And how do I validate my results? So go to peer reviewers. Right? So that is very important, and keep this in your mind. Every research paper is going from a problem to a solution. That will be the underlying. If you are able to give your research paper to a 10th standard, a sensible person who can read well, and if you can tell them, can you find the problem and the solution from this research paper? Or even a BA or an MA student, they should be able to tell you. If they are able to tell you, the reason or the motivation for why we publish, I just wanted to talk about it, whether it is research scholar or whether it is assistant professors who are working on their career advancements. Definitely, when you publish a book, you get royalties. Okay, so definitely an element of monetary benefit is there. And then when you are cited, your fame increases when you go to conferences, when you go to workshops. And then there is also a responsibility. As an academic, I feel that, I should give back to the community talking about what challenges I face in the classroom so that they can not do the mistakes and they can do it differently. So And one more thing is people say that, no, I research my classroom. Teacher researchers. Teacher research is another growing area now. I've heard teachers saying, I have 18 hours of classes per week. I have 20 hours of classes per week. How do you expect me to do research? How do you expect me to write a research paper? Okay, so I kind of think, oh my God, there is a Paramuri in Tamil, right? Right? So I think they have the greatest resource to do research. See, because of my academic and because of my administrative responsibilities, I've been taken, my workload with my classrooms has decreased. But then I'm working on a research topic now. And so I have requested classes from other teachers, whether they can give me some classes so that I can go and teach in their classes, do some research and collect the data. Right? So teacher research is absolutely fantastic because it validates your research. If you are teaching for an engineering college and if you are writing on a paper on Shakespeare, then the validity of the research is doubted, right? Because you are teaching engineering students. If you can write a paper on the challenges that you face or your students face, that would add more validity. And that can also be one of the reasons why your paper is not accepted, right? So keep thinking about this idea. So if you see types of papers, in a journal, there will be different sections. Full articles or original articles or research articles. Then there is also review, and then there are some perspectives, short communications, rapid communications, letters or activities. These are also there. So you can try and write something like that. So recently I was trying that I will create a language activity and send it to that journal. If I'm not able to publish at least a research article, at least my name would appear in the language activity part, right? So you need to understand that there are different ways of publishing your ideas. These are some reasons for rejection. Maybe the submission is out of scope, some formatting issues. You send it in a doc format. If they open, they are seeing all boxes. Okay, so that can be a problem. Standard of English, definitely yes, but with Grammarly and other tools, I think no, that's a great blessing for us also. Incorrect reviewer suggestions, not addressing reviewer comments, and submission of rejected papers. Now, this is another, if you submit a rejected paper without reworking on it, then it is definitely going into rejection. So, when I spoke about self-development in that researcher development framework, being self-critical is very important. Paying attention to ethical standards, submit to the right journal, ask your colleagues to proofread it, check your language, pay attention to journal requirements, and submit one paper to one journal only. Now, this is very critical. I kind of, in case you are too eager, write another paper and publish it to another journal, but do not submit the same paper to 2 or 3 journals. It is not ethical at all. So when we talk about quality, the underlying hypothesis must be scientifically valid. When I say scientifically valid, don't ask me, so how do I make Mahashweta Devi's, the Armani Champatri or other stories, the breast stories or other stories, how do I make it scientifically valid? Literature reflects the society. Gayatri Spivak says literature is nothing but a mental therapy for the society. So say how valid your research is. Okay? Then experimental design. Are you going to do an experimental design, a quasi-experimental design, a pre-tested, a post-test design? What is the quality of your data set? Does it have a good size? Does it have a completeness about it? And is there a clarity about the data set? Conclusion supported by results. So are you concluding based on the results that you have got, or are you simply giving your own conclusions? Is there an element of a statistical analysis and acknowledgement funding? This, if you have this, the quality is taken care of. So also think about your audience. You are going to send the paper to both local and worldwide specialists in that area. Sometimes it can be multidisciplinary researchers and general audience. So your paper must cater to all these audience types. And now moving on to the final section. I know that I have very less time, but just some language, because research language is very different. So you know that these words are very important. Inductive reasoning, epistemology. When you're writing a paper on, say Shelley, or when you're writing on somebody like, Umberto Eco or any Kafka, anybody, epistemology, the root of that knowledge is very important. How comfortable are we in using these words when we write our research paper, right? Understanding their meanings and the ability to use them. Okay, so both active and passive vocabulary you need to have. So these are the definitions of those words. I kind of go in detail explaining the importance of these words, which I'm not doing today, but you need to understand. You need to understand and use these in your research papers also. These are certain words that you should be very fluent with. Okay, that you should be very fluent with. So if you look at the building blocks of research paper writing, only when you do real research, you can write a one-sentence answer to your research question, and you can share in a very believable, understandable, and usable manner. So some think that research writing can be done out of the blue. I will conjure a lot of data. Okay, I will magically create data, cook up data, and I will write. No, that is not possible. Okay, so very recently I was working on the speaking skills of my students, and what I did was I gave them a speaking assessment where they have to speak about their speaking experiences in that entire semester. So the paper had my teaching methodologies, and the paper also had my, the speaking assessment which I used. I recorded them, I changed it into a verbal transcript, I data coded it, I tabulated it, and then I arrived at my conclusion. So students are our greatest resource to do research. So ability to summarize and categorize data, critical thinking, analytical thinking, explanation, all these things are important. This is a kind of a puzzle I usually do with my students. Okay, so like I tell them, these are all the words that you need to know. False, experiment, outcomes, data, statistics, and all that. So I've also given them the answers and the clues. So we usually do it in a class. Even in an online session, I have done it. So they kind of take some time when I need a break for 5 or 6 minutes. I ask them to do this and then I come back. But of course, now because we do not have that luxury, I'm quickly moving on to the answer section. So maybe, you can take a screenshot of it and you can try and work on. So when you talk about research writing, you think about a very formal method, a very objective and an impersonal way of writing. Maybe some journals use we, our, paper, they allow that kind of usages, but most journals do not, right? When you are working on the titles, look at the titles, right? I think I will have to charge my laptop and just turn on the video for a while. Yeah. So we know that we are talking about titles where, longish kind of titles, confusing titles, and all these things. So we will have to see how we will work on the titles also. Okay. So look at this paragraph. Okay, I'm taking only one paragraph, which is usually from the introduction part of it maybe. So in a paper where you are seeing a paragraph where there is currently an ongoing debate in primary education about the role of classroom assistants within schools. For example, it is becoming more common for classroom assistants to participate more in the strategic decision-making process. Now, this is somebody's view. However, it is not clear. Okay, for teachers, whether this trend will have an adverse effect on the ability of teachers. It may be that this change will have negative consequences, as somebody else suggests. Now, in this paragraph, when you actually see, there is a structure in this paragraph. There is a topic sentence. So the first sentence is sometimes called the topic sentence. And in this particular topic sentence, they have introduced it very nicely, right? Because they're talking about a current ongoing debate. Look at the next line. So this is the topic sentence. The next sentence is, for example, however, these are called signaling phrases. Now imagine earlier when we were not using Google Maps, we used to rely on the green boards, or we used to rely on the name boards which said Madurai 300 kilometers, Madurai 250 kilometers, Madurai 50 kilometers, right? Like that, when you are reading, this kind of signaling phrases are very important. Again, start with known information and then provide new information. Okay, so if you are taking screenshots of these slides, read them. When you are, writing a research paper, see if your paragraphs also have this kind of structure, whether this kind of direction to it, very important. And look at the cohesive links. What is the cohesive link that is used? So teacher assistants are there, and they are talking about the role of teacher assistants in schools, classroom assistants in schools. But then classroom assistants are making more decisions. So that is the cohesive point between the first sentence and the second sentence. Okay. So when you are writing, some useful questions will be, does your writing deal with a topic that was set? Now this is something that is very important, because you write on a topic, then you find some literature review, literature references, then you just go to a different question altogether. Okay, is the genre correct? Okay, there is a double though there. Or is it a report or an essay or a review? Sometimes when I read research papers, I find them like essays or a review of some other book. So most literature papers sound like a book review. Okay, it is not a book review. It is more than that. Your argument is more important. Okay. Now, a checklist before you try and submit your paper. Is there a clear distinction between your ideas and those of other authors? You are not there to regurgitate what they have said and validate their research. You are here to interpret and produce more research. Is your voice clear throughout? Now, this is something that's very important. When we talk about research, right, it will all be, he said this, they have this opinion, the author says this. But where is your opinion? So before the conclusion, when you are talking about the results and the findings, or in a thesis, usually your fourth chapter is very important. You are talking about what you have analyzed. Okay, so your voice should come out. Definitely acknowledging all the sources you have saved. I'll tell you, as an editor of a Scopus Index journal, what I do. When I get a paper, I take the reference sheet as a printout, and I kind of keep a pen, paper, and in that reference sheet, I kind of tick. Okay, here they have talked about this reference. Have they given that reference there? Tick. Then there will be some random, references which are not used in the paper. Then I'll put a question mark. Okay, so acknowledging all the sources you have used is very important. Sometimes you will be using quotations from a book. That person would have used it as a literature review. You will be using that person, so that is not direct quoting. Go to the original article and give the reference for that. Okay, so style, time is very important. You cannot send it to some journal and say, please, your deadline is over, please accept my article. No. Okay, now writing the abstract, because writing the abstract is very important. So I'll just tell you what is good about an abstract and what is bad. Many times stick to the journal's requirement. If it is too short, okay, you only speak about the gist of the article. You're not talking about why, what, how, and your findings. Okay, so what? So 200 words, 250 words is enough to write a decent abstract. Structure. Jumping from point to point with no clear flow will confuse your readers. Follow the structure of a paper. Okay, I mean, you need to, sometimes when I sit with my scholars, I do this. I put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1 is going to be this. You are going to talk about all these things. 1.1, you are going to talk about this. 1.1.1, you are going to talk about this. So usually for a research thesis, you can go up to 1.5. And within that 1.5, you can go up to 1.5.3. But in a research paper, please stop at 1.1.3. Okay, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. You don't have to name it that way when you are actually putting the side headings. Okay, but that clarity should be there when you write a research paper and follow that particular structure. Content, too much content about others' work. Hey, what is this fellow? He's telling Thornby said this, Jeremy Brown said this, he said this. What is he saying? Pick the pertinent point, but then discuss your ideas. That is very important. Style is also important. The tense of the paper. Now, language of the research paper is an entirely different webinar altogether. How within that paragraph you are using one has, one had, one was, one is, right? So there is no reason why the reviewer should even read your paper. Language, too much jargon. Too much jargon in the abstract. This can also be a problem. And I have seen many people use acronyms or abbreviations right in the abstract without any explanation. Do not do that. I know that when you're writing an abstract, you're trying to save characters, you're trying to save words, but then explain the concept, then start using the acronyms. So conclusion should be there. Many of them think that conclusion is not very important. Anyway, I have given all my results. But conclusion is very important. Okay, writing the keywords. Keywords is the only way to improve your own citation index. If you give the proper keyword, people, when they are searching for articles, your article will appear if you have given the proper keyword. And these days, there are also something called video abstract. Okay, graphical or video abstract. Abstracts are not just paragraphs, but they are asking for graphical abstract. Usually, when I am traveling or when I just want to look at some journals, there will be some video abstracts of recent papers. So I will just listen to the video abstract and then decide whether I should read this paper. This is because we are all becoming very visual learners, right? Our increasing screen time, the evolutionary pathway of human beings, because of all these scientific and genetic reasons, there is the reason for these journals also, the academy also, to increase video abstracts. Great. So this is like, 10 characteristics of an incredibly dull paper. If there is no focus, if your personality is not coming out in that paper, if you're making that article like really, really long because you want to write 26 pages, and if you do not indicate any potential implications, see, implication should be there, right? What do I achieve by reading your paper? And how is my paper impacting the field? If you are leaving out illustrations, if you are omitting the necessary steps of reasoning, in mathematics, you used to have these step marks, right? So in step marks, you will be having why it is important to write these steps, like that, reasoning. Abbreviations and technical terms, only if specialists can understand. And then make it sound too serious with no significant. Some people will write, this area is so important. It is so important that it has to be studied. And then I'll be like, okay, show me why that area is important. Sometimes papers are focusing only on statistics. People are happy when they have put the pie charts that they have generated from Google Forms. Right? These days we are collecting a lot of data from Google Forms, and Google Forms gives us beautiful pie charts and bar charts. So they think that the discussion section, if it has those pie charts and bar charts, people can look at them, find the data. Why bother explaining and interpreting them? Support every statement with a reference. Like I told you, A paragraph is full of references. Okay, you can't do this. So now, having listened to me, you would have guessed that the language of research is similar to a foreign language itself. I have brought you some activities, but I'm afraid I won't be able to do these activities with you because these are minute. Okay, at a minuscule level, these are very subtle. Finding formal language and informal language, because you have already written some papers which you're trying to convert into research papers. See which sentence is more formal and go for the formal sentence. Here, if you see, I will just explain one sentence here. So, articles on women's sports were placed on the left page, often at the bottom, which is a less prominent position. We have a media science student here, so he would understand the politics behind this kind of a statement. Less prominent position, same sentence, overlooked by readers, area most readers jump over. Okay, so obviously, if I'm writing a research paper, I will not use sentence 2 and 3. Okay, because I would try and use sentence 1 because that is more formal for me. So informal language instances, if you see, very well. Very is a word you must not write in a research paper. In case you have the word very in your research paper, put a Control F, search. If the word is there, please delete it and put a good synonym. Okay, thesaurus we can use. Wasn't efficient. Look at this. I feel that it wasn't efficient. This is my personal feeling. And lots of values. What is lots of values? Like lots of sugar or lots of salt. That is also not research language at all. And really quite good. These results are really quite good. This is not, this is not a personal advice or a personal review of a movie saying, oh, the movie is really quite good or boring. No, you can't use these informal languages. So use these words instead of the words that I have given on the left. Okay. Personal pronouns, you have to try and avoid. Use passive voice. Use the third person. I discovered that becomes research reveals that. Okay, so these are some examples. Impersonal writing is absolutely important. Okay, so that again will be another one. And words you must include in your research paper. So already you have written some research paper. See if all these words are there. Okay, supports, ushers in. So I usually use a finer way because I use the word subtle. I thought I should speak about a finer way to do your research, which is like feasible. Is my research feasible? Do I use only this much time, money? Is it interesting to the investigator? Is it novel to the field? Is it ethical? Okay, my son is watching a football match and he's clapping loud. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, can you keep it down? Okay, ethical. Whether it is any causing harm to the subjects, especially when you use photos of children, no journal will accept it. But then you will say that this is an important aspect of my research and relevant. Okay, so the feasibility, which is very important, whether it is interesting to you and your investigator, the novel, whether it is ethical and whether it is relevant. So just think about these things. So certain words, using tentative language. Now this is something that I want to discuss because this is called hedging. Now hedging is very important because later if you are writing on a controversial topic and you are getting into a problem, okay, there can be legal issues also. I can tell you about this because I receive RTIs every day based on research papers and their publications. They say that I have used this sentence in this meaning, but the reviewer has misunderstood it and the reviewer says like this. So presenting a credible argument. Okay, so how can you present a credible argument? Tentative language. Now, look at these sentences. Diet was an important factor in the health of the respondents. Or the evidence suggests. Don't go and write the first sentence. Don't go and say it was only because of diet that these patients suffered from this problem. Instead, what are you saying? It is evident from the data that diet was an important factor because you have already collected the data about it. So this is called a hedged claim, indicating that the evidence is not sufficient to make an outright claim, and there can be other interpretations also. See, E is equal to MC square might be a very standard equation, but we know how many researchers came after that to disprove that kind of thing. So learn some bit of hedging language where you are using the results indicator that. Okay, so results indicator, not showed. So some more examples of hedging I have given. Hedging is a very good way to stay safe. Avoiding overgeneralizations. Look at this. Chinese are Buddhists. They go to the temple 5 times a year. So maybe they don't. Maybe you know these are. Look at the next paragraph. Many Chinese are Buddhists. Practicing Buddhists go to the temple about 5 times a year. There can be not practicing Buddhists also. Okay, and this is a very critical question, very controversial area because it is about religion. Okay, so trying to do that, understanding where and how to use quantifiers and qualifiers, using words like a majority of the participants, a minority, a number of. Okay, so these are all certain words that you should be using when you are using the hedging language. So it's better always to check with your supervisors and keep a plain English definition in your mind if somebody is asking you why you use that word. Use some existing glossaries to build up your knowledge. Don't feel intimidated if others, they use complex language very confidently. We will also come to that point sometime later. And share with your peers. Keep a notebook or a Word document in which you build up your own glossary of research terms. That is very important. And always when you are learning a word, write a sentence for your own context. So this will be the last slide. These are certain websites that I have found very useful, especially when I'm writing a research paper. Okay, because there is a good phrase bank. You can see the academic phrase bank from Manchester University. It's an excellent phrase bank for academic writing. And Adrian Wahlberg's English for Writing Research Papers is the book I go to every time whenever I teach writing research because it's an excellent book. My students have read the book, I believe, because I teach from this book very often. Great, that brings us to the end of the session. And